If you've ever visited the Holy Land, you may have seen me there. I stand near the dark Dead Sea. I have been here for a very long time. The Dead Sea is harsh to swim in. Rather flowing. The salt, will creep inside your every crevice and cause every cut and wound to hurt. Wounds you don't even know you had would sting and smart as soon as it crawled inside them. Salt is bitter to the taste. I should know. All that I am and all that I have been for thousands of years is salt. They say that my husband was a good man, the only good man in our city. God wanted to wipe out our city, but Abraham, he bargained him down. See, Abraham was my husband's uncle, and he and God were quite close. So God said that he would destroy our city, and Abraham, he asked, well, but what if there are 50 righteous men in that city? Would you destroy the righteous along with the wicked? God said no. So then Abraham asked, so what if there were 45 righteous men, or 30, or 20? And he was able to haggle God down to 10. Well, it turns out there was only one righteous man, and it was Abraham's nephew, Lot, my husband. So God sent 2 angels to our house, and my husband was a very righteous man. He greeted them. He let the angels know he was their servant, and he had me wash the feet of these 2 beautiful young men in a basin of water with a clean cloth. And I made these 2 men an enormous meal, unleavened bread and wine, and roasted lamb, and pastry stuffed with cheese, and rose petal jam. Everything that I knew how to prepare well, Lot ordered me to make. And I set it all before these 2 shining, beautiful young men. But our neighbors were rough and crude. They resented the righteousness of my husband. That was not new. This had been going on for some time. And they had seen these men arrive, and they banged on the door and demanded that Lot send the men outside for our neighbors to rape. Well, my husband, he would never do that. He would never turn on a guest like that. My husband understood the rules of good manners and hospitality. My husband was a righteous man after all. So he told the crowd outside of our house, I have 2 unmarried daughters here at home, virgins. I will send them outside to you. You can gang rape them, he said, instead of the angels, my visitors. For any of you that read the Bible, you would generally assume that when the crowd continued to demand the angels, that no harm came to my daughters, right? That my husband's generous offer was turned down. I will not discuss what I think may have happened. The truth is, I am not sure exactly what happened. I objected to what my husband was saying. You see, for the first time in my life, I stood up to him. I was wild. I was shouting and pleading and grabbing at his clothing, and so he locked me in a back room. And I could not really hear for a long time what occurred. And my daughters were screaming and crying in terror. The crowd outside was jeering and threatening and calling it obscenities and laughing, and my husband was shouting at them righteously. And I myself was screaming and pounding with my hands on the door that I could not get open. And that went on for a long time. Endlessly, it seemed. When at last, that good man, Lot, allowed me out of the room where he had locked me. Things had changed. The angels had brought blindness down to the men outside the house, and those men were no longer a threat. My daughters, they were huddled in the room, consoling each other and weeping, and they wouldn't speak to me. They wouldn't speak to anyone. My husband, he told me that I had to gather our things and pack, to take everything I could carry, and my daughters had to do the same. Once we left the house, my husband led us to the homes of my married daughters. But our sons-in-law jeered at him. I mean, he was a very righteous man, you see. And that caused some people to dislike him. Some saw him as proud, humorless, priggish, and smug. So my married daughters, they were left behind in Sodom. Well, we headed down the road to Zor. And Sodom, I mean, you must understand, I grew up in Sodom. I had friends in the city when I was young. Once I was married, I was not allowed to leave my husband's house. And my daughters, the unmarried ones, they rarely left the house. Although I don't know if he threw them out that day or not, but in any case, I remembered my parents and my grandmother. I remembered childhood friends and playmates. I remembered my married daughters and my grandchildren. And as we headed down the road to Zor, the town where my husband planned to hide, that was when God chose to smite the city of Sodom. You know, he rained down fire and brimstone and fire and sulfur, and there were sparks and flames and lightning bolts in the sky, and this horrific smell in the air. It was, you could smell the sulfur and the acrid smoke. You could smell the sweet, seared human flesh, and you could just hear those screams. You could hear the buildings collapsing, caving in on the people inside, all over my city, and the ground. They trembled as they fell, and I was walking behind my husband, and he had ordered me not to look back, but I heard a scream, and it sounded like my oldest married daughter, and so I looked back, and so he left me there. Here. He left me here. And this is where I stand. I was deemed unworthy, you see. I look back, so I must have been lusting for a wicked way of life. So I stand here now. Many tourists visit this place and gawk at me. People from different faiths and sects, from all around the world, with cameras and prayer groups. You know, sometimes they even prayer next to me. Sometimes they read aloud from the Torah. And that is how I have come to know what happened to my family. My husband and my daughters, they went on to the town of Zor. But then my husband took my 2 young daughters away from the village and up into a cave in the mountains. I don't know why. I don't know the state of their minds. I don't know what exactly happened to them when I was locked in that room, pounding on the doors until my hands bled. I don't know how that affected them. The destruction of our city and leaving our relatives behind, leaving me behind, their mother here as a pillar of salt. I do not know if they were thinking clearly. But what I have heard read in the Torah is that they thought they had to lie with my husband. I mean, perhaps they thought that every city everywhere would be consumed in flames as our city was. Perhaps they thought that he was the last man on earth. You know, this one righteous man that God had spared. Perhaps they went a little funny in the head. They gave him wine. And he got drunk. And he lay with one of them that first night, and, you know, perhaps he was aware of what he had done when she got up and left. You know, they gave him more wine. And he lay with our youngest daughter. And after my husband had sex with our two youngest daughters, well, he impregnated them both. They each had a son. And there was no punishment for him from God for doing that, because you know, Lot was still good in God's eyes. He was not wicked and sinful like I, or like my city. And because, I mean, my husband, after all, was a righteous man. I have a lot of time to think while I'm standing here. I may not be recognizably human to you, but I can still see you and hear you. I can still feel the sun beat down on me. And I have a bitter taste in my mouth, always. It's the taste of salt. All that I am is salt. All of my memories are encrusted and preserved in salt. And it stings.